And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. As promised, we're going to get into some exciting high-tech stuff. We're going to start with updates on the WorkZone data, data exchange, and some related grant projects. So coming to you live from TTI, we have Mr. Jerry Oman. Jerry, why don't you take the floor?
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where in the country you're listening in and watching in. Again, my name is Jerry Ullman with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. I have the pleasure of moderating this session this afternoon. We've got 3 presentations for speakers. I think that you'll find very enlightening, very, very useful information. The first presenter, as I introduce you, would you mind coming up to the stage? The first presenter is Nate Deshmukhtari. Nate's is a technology policy analyst at the U.S. Department of Transportation's John A. Volpe National Transportation Systems Center. He is the U.S. DOT lead for the WorkZone Data Exchange Project on behalf of the ITS Joint Program Office. In his other work at Volpe, he works to boost early-stage transportation technologies out of the lab and into the field with FHWA's Exploratory Advanced Research Program, which funds longer-term, higher-risk research projects that could lead to transformational changes and truly revolutionary advances in highway engineering and intermodal surface transportation in the United States. Our next presentation will be performed by Adam Carrion with the Arizona DOT and April Wire. Adam is part of the Operational Traffic and Safety Group within the TSMO division at Arizona DOT, where he has developed his love for transportation over the past 16 years. He has worked in the construction group and the traffic design before switching to operation. He personally championed the implementation of smart work zones within the department and is the state work zone safety and mobility champion. Adam is a member of the ATSA Signal Committee, Red Means Stop Coalition, and the Work Zone Data Exchange 3 subcommittees. April Weil will be joining him. She's worked in the ITS and traffic engineering field for 15 years. She currently serves as the Maricopa County Department of Transportation as the Arterial Operations Program Manager and is responsible for overseeing the Maricopa County's DOT's TMC, ITS projects, and supports the Aztec Regional Partnership and its initiative. April has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering degree from the Missouri University of Science and Technology, is a registered professional engineer, and has certification as a professional traffic operations engineer. The third presentation will be Corey O'Connor. Corey is a registered professional engineer in the state of Massachusetts and has a Master of Science in Transportation Engineering degree from the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Corey has worked in the traffic and safety engineering section of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation's Highway Division for over 9 years and has experience reviewing, designing, inspecting smart work zone setups across the state. Corey is now helping Massachusetts MassDOT implement more smart work zones across the state and is helping develop a standard API specification for smart work zone devices through the Work Zone Data Exchange. We're going to have each of the presentations go in sequence. I'm going to ask you all that have questions to enter them into the chat and identify if your questions for one of our speakers or for the general group, and we'll do all the question and answer at the end after we've had all 3 of the presentations.
Quick interjection, Jerry, just to remind them if they're looking to ask questions, please type them in the Q&A box as opposed to the
Q&A box. My bad.
Chat will scroll by too fast and we'll miss it. So if you're looking for that, if you look to the right of all of you, you're seeing on the screen, you see chat, participants, and then Q&A. Type it in there. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So with that, Nate, would you come on up and give us your presentation?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Looking forward to talking to you about the WorkZone Data Exchange and highlighting all the work that Adam, April, Corey, and others are doing to implement the specification. So I'm going to start with what is WZDX, because for those of you who are familiar with it, hopefully it's pretty straightforward. For those of you who've heard a little bit about it, but you're not entirely sure, I just want to kind of start with the basics. It's a simple open standard for sharing data about planned and active work zones. Currently, that's it. Actually, that's not entirely true. There's a little bit of detour information, but other than that, it is just designed to be a simple and open standard. You can see a flow path on the right of kind of how WZDX works at a high level. Next slide, please. So where did WZDX come from? I won't spend too long here, but it's kind of useful and illustrative to understand why WZDX is slightly different than some other ITS standards that you may be familiar with. So WZDX came about in conversations between US DOT, state DOTs, local DOTs, and the automated driving system universe back in late 2017, where we asked kind of how do we smooth the implementation of automated vehicles into the nation's roadway system safely. And the OEMs and other stakeholders said, well, one thing we need is authoritative data from the road owners themselves about conditions on the roadway. Primarily, a good starting place would be information about work zones, because we don't really know how to deal with work zones, especially back in 2017, but even today. And so knowing where they are can help us navigate safely around them. And so we started there. We built an initial little coalition together. And we looked around and said, okay, where do we start? We don't want to tackle the universe here. We want to just start small, start with simple and grow iteratively and make it as useful as possible so that we can get it out into the world. We looked around and settled on the general transit feed specification model. For those of you who are unfamiliar with GTFS, it started as a collaboration between Google and their mapping department and the TriMet Authority in Oregon for exchanging transit schedule information, and it grew in the same way. Give me your schedule information and I'll try to publish it on a map. And now today it's used all over the world for a wide variety of uses, including station diagrams, pathways through station for accessible transit, all sorts of different stuff. But it started small and grew iteratively from there. It's always been open to everyone, and WZDX is as well. Next slide, please. This is kind of our mission, our motto. Hopefully you like it too, with the notion that if we start simple, we keep it to the minimum amount of data required about a work zone. We make it open to everyone. We make it easy for everyone to adopt it, and that will help save lives. Better data about work zones exchanged in a standard way can help get it into vehicles and save lives. All right, I want to go a little bit into what the WZDX specification looks like and how it's organized. I don't want to spend too much time here. I don't want to scare you off, but it's kind of illustrative to kind of think about how your work zone data today could be packaged up and distributed in this format. Hopefully it's not super complicated. So it's structured as an object model, and it uses GeoJSON, which is a version of JSON, which hopefully you're familiar with. And it is a GeoJSON feature collection. Next slide, please. The highest level object is the feed object. You can see that it includes roughly 2 buckets, one about road event feed info, the information about the feed itself and the data that it comes from, and the other is the features of each road event within. There's one WZDX feed object per, basically per WZDX feed. Next slide, please. So this breaks down a little further into what goes into the road event feed info bucket. It's essentially the metadata, the version, contact information, etc. You can see on the left all of the data elements that are in this part of the object diagram. There's one feed info per document. You're not publishing this every single time you're sharing information about each work zone. Next slide, please. Similarly, the data source feeds into the feed info. You can see again the properties on the left about the data itself, how often it's updated, how you determine location for your particular agency or for this feed. There can be multiple data source objects here, but you have to have at least one. Next slide, please. All right, so this now takes us to the other half of the object diagram, the road event feature object, and it is the container object for which all of your work zones, or road events in this case, are, as well as information about the geometry of each of those, either line, string, or multipoint. Next slide, please. This is sort of the meat of the WZDX feed itself, the road event. There are 2 types of road events currently in WZDX. There could be others. It's theoretically extensible to other types of temporary incidents on the roadway. But for right now, we just focus on work zones and detours. You can see down below, this is all of the properties about each event that you could include. Not all of these are required data elements. I didn't break out which ones were and which ones weren't by some sort of feature. So you can go to the spec itself on GitHub. We'll have a link at the end and take a look if you would like to know a little bit more about which ones are and are not in there. For each road event, you can optionally specify lane level information, specific types of work that are going on the roadway, what is actually happening, as well as linking different road events together through the relationship bucket. And I promise that is it in terms of the deep dive. So if that felt a little bit too much, we'll just kind of keep going along and you can pretend it didn't happen. Awesome. So the WorkZone Data Exchange sits underneath a open public-private partnership called the WorkZone Data Working Group, which is charged with maintaining the WZDX specification. Like I said, it's open to everyone, public and private sector, at no charge. You can send me an email. I'll have an email address at the end, and I will add you to this bucket. I am one of the co-leads for this group. The other is a man named Dave Craig from General Motors. He is their chief of maps in their automated driving group. And GM has a strong interest in getting better data about work zones into their automated, semi-automated vehicles. The WorkZone Data Working Group also is focused on promoting best practices around creating, managing, and using WorkZone event data and extending and expanding the WZDX specification. And you can see that tiny little bullet down on the bottom right. What I mean by open is that all of the meetings of the group are on a public calendar. You can join any of them and all of them if you'd like. And all of the meeting notes and most of the recordings for the larger sessions are also available. Next slide, please. So underneath this high-level bucket of a working group are 5 other working groups. We call them subgroups because it's confusing to have 2 sets of working groups, but that's effectively what they are. I won't read all of the words on this slide, but essentially the 5 groups are one charged with updating the WZDX specification itself, a second that's focused on finding out better ways to report the presence of workers in a work zone through WZDX to improve worker safety. The third is focused on technical assistance and community engagement, trying to figure out how to get people who produce WZDX data feeds and people who consume them to kind of help them meet in the middle and actually drive adoption. The fourth, which Corey will talk a little bit more about in his presentation, is the Smart Work Zone Devices group, which is developing a corollary Smart Work Zone device, Smart Work Zone feed that goes along next to a Work Zone Data Exchange feed to include more real-time elements. And the last but not least is a subgroup focused specifically on potential extensions to WZDX. So I mentioned in what we call road events, we allow for work zones and detours. Obviously, there are other types of data about the roadway that you could include here. So the group is focused right now on figuring out how to include linear features like bridge heights in sort of a corollary bridge height or bridge information feed to minimize overheight vehicles smashing into bridges. But there are lots of other potential extensions. So if you have an idea that you'd like to kind of bring to the table, that's the place to do it. Next slide, please. So this feed registry or clearinghouse is the place where the USDOT maintains where you can go and find all of the live verified WZDX data feeds that are available today. That way, if you're looking to consume them or you're looking to see what's there, you can go to one place and find active links to APIs that each data provider makes available. This is modeled also on GTFS and other open specifications where there's usually one place where you can go and find all of the active feeds. You're not having to go agency by agency, calling folks, emailing folks to get access to their feed. They're all in one place. USDOT is committed to maintaining this for the foreseeable future, and we assume that wherever WZDX goes in the future, this will continue to be available. Next slide. All right. So this is a multicolor map, sorry, for those who have to stare at it very closely like I do. The USDOT, in order to jumpstart adoption for WZDX, made a one-time grant opportunity available a couple years back that's finally just kicked off. And that's why Adam and April and Corey are here to set up, establish, and expand existing feeds or set up new feeds. You can see the blue states are states that were awarded a demonstration grant and that are working over the next year, ending next summer or so, to establish WZDX feeds. The brown or diagonal lines that look brown on my screen, states are states that also won WCDX grants but had feeds, rudimentary feeds, and are looking to expand them or add new features to them. The orange states are states that have independently set up WCDX data feeds, Texas and North Carolina. Michigan and Pennsylvania have also committed to WCDX data feeds through existing USDOT awards. And you can go to them for more information about that. So by next summer, well, I should say now, there are 4 or 5 active data feeds right now. And by next summer, we're expecting to have upwards of 20 to 25 or half the country. And we're very excited that many of those feeds are also statewide data feeds so that you have data from every state operated work zone in the state available as a WCDX feed. Next slide, please. I want to walk you through a potential use case for WCDX, stealing hopefully not too much of April and Adam's thunder. So this is one way that Maricopa County demonstrated use of WCDX by partnering with Drivewise, which is a pre-clearance provider, along with Swift Trucking, which is based in Phoenix, to send WCDX data straight into electronic logging devices in cabs to notify drivers of commercial motor vehicles about impending work zones. They can also include detour routes around those work zones and queue warning information for if there's a backup. As you can see, Maricopa and Arizona are going to talk a little bit in a sec about what they're doing with their demonstration grant to expand this, but we thought this was a really cool kind of proof of life demonstration of what you could use WCDX data to do. Next slide, please. And then I also wanted to talk briefly about an open source tool. You may have heard about it from other folks that was funded by Federal Highway to basically automatically generate WCDX data feeds in a work zone. You input some basic information by drawing a line in Google Maps using the tool or Azure Maps. And then either with a Android device or a GPS-enabled laptop, you drive through it. It automatically snaps the work zone to the map and generates a WCDX feed as well as a roadside safety message feed for those work zones. It's currently in testing by a bunch of different states. And we look forward to kind of wider spread deployment of that as an easy way to get your WCDX more real-time data out there in the world. Next slide, please. All right, and this is my second to last slide. So I urge you to get involved if you're not already. You can join the Works on Data Working Group. We have a semi-annual meeting. Obviously, we meet twice a year. It's on November 2nd, so in a couple weeks from noon to 2:30 Eastern, where we kind of review what the latest progress of each of the working groups is and kind of plan the next 6 to 9 months. Send me an email. I'm avdx@dot.gov. You can join one of those 5 working groups. If you have a specific interest in one or more of those areas that I mentioned, or you're interested in kind of starting a new area of related work, we're open. You know, this is a community-driven effort. This is not a USDOT-driven effort, and so we encourage you to kind of step in and participate as you will. You're the ones who kind of do the work and keep this going. And we encourage you to get on the GitHub site, which is where all of the specific development of the spec happens. Ask questions, submit an issue, something you'd like to see changed or added to the spec, and share your knowledge with the community. And with that, I will close with questions, which we are going to take at the end. But if you put them in the Q&A box, I look forward to answering them. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Very, very useful, interesting, and important information there. I'd like to now ask Adam and April to come up and provide us some information that's going on in Arizona. So, and as Nate said, feel free to continue to enter your questions in the chat or the Q&A box, and then we'll get to those after our presentations are over with. So, okay, Adam and April.
All right, thank you, Gerald. Can you guys hear me okay? Just make sure.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Nate, for teeing that up for Adam and I. Again, I'm April Wire. I am the Arterial Operations Program Manager here at Maricopa County. And then on the line as well, we have Adam Curion, who's with ADOT. So we're going to be co-presenting today to talk about the Work Zone Data Exchange Demonstration Project. And so, again, thank you, Nate, for teeing it up because he explained a lot of the past work that we've done in our region of Phoenix, Arizona, on work zone data and how we are progressing moving forward with this demonstration project through a grant with USDOT that Nate discussed. And so we'll go ahead and kick it off. We have lots of visions and key objectives that are associated with this project. The 5 are listed here. Obviously, we ultimately want to improve the safety of work zones, recognizing that work zones can be very challenging for drivers of all kind. Autonomous vehicles, that's coming on the forefront, and we want to be able to provide very real-time, valuable information to those vehicles so they can traverse the work zones more effectively. We want to improve the accuracy and consistency of the work zone data, building on the data that we are providing to our regional travelers today, but making it more real time. Right now, what happens is, we get the permitting information for construction zones and whatnot, and we enter them in manually. So we want to streamline that process, make it more accurate, make it more real time. We want to modernize the ingestion of the data into other formats. We recognize that it needs to be translated into the WZDX specification, and through this project, we should be able to do that. And then we want to also transition the local agency feeds that we're getting for work zones into the WZDX format. And so we're going to continue working with our institutional partners. We have a lot of good partners from the local agencies and then also from the private sector as well. So through this project, we're hoping to expand on that. And so we've done a lot of good historical work through our Aztec Regional Partnership. The Aztec Regional Partnership really helps bring together the local agencies to work on like-kind initiatives really related to transportation technologies. We're definitely building on that relationship that we've already built through projects like this and bringing everyone together so we can move efforts like this forward more collaboratively. We've piloted projects related to a work zone on the arterials and on the freeways. And so we definitely are going to be growing on top of that. We've successfully implemented the WZDX framework 1.0 and 2.0. So we are going to be moving forward with the new version of the WZDX that we're currently on. And then just helping the region move forward with the strong relationships and champion WZDX initiatives moving forward has been very critical in our success.
April,
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to add that, no, it's fine. You can leave it there. I think I really want to stress that Aztec collaboration. I saw it a lot in construction with formal partnerships and having, a charter and a mission statements really help formalize all of that. And that Aztec, it's, AZ Tech is primarily between us, Maricopa County DOT and Arizona DOT. And that's the impetus of which we do all of our grant work through, really, because it's an existing partnership between us. You get the arterial side, kind of, a more of a local government side, and in a freeway, statewide look at the same problem, same thing. And I know for you, the arterials, smart work zones and arterials is very new. So it allows for all of those collaborations to happen within an existing framework, existing context. We just submitted for another grant, and that process was very smooth and easy, and not something we had to create every time we see an opportunity to do something in the region in this regard.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Thank you for adding that. I definitely agree with Adam on that. The Aztec partnership has tremendous value for us as a region on moving initiatives like this forward and being on the same page. And that can be very challenging, to bring all the players to the table and make sure that all of us understand the goals and want to move initiatives like this forward. And so this next slide summarizes the work that we've already done. We've done a lot with regional construction and maintenance information in ingestion. So that's related to construction, permitting information that we already enter our systems. We've definitely grown on that quite a bit. It's definitely still a manual process, so we want to make it a more automated process. So taking the, human side not out of it per se, but the entry side out of it, making it a little bit more seamless. We've worked with the FHWA Everyday Counts Initiatives 3 with smarter work zones and deployment of that. And we continue working with the FHWA Everyday Counts 5 and 6 initiatives for crowdsourcing of data and moving that into that digital platform like that. So Nate already kind of hit on some of the work that we've done through our other projects for smarter work zones, working with Swift, our private partners, DriveWise, to get some of this work zone data into vehicles so that drivers can make very educated decisions on how to traverse the work zone. Should they go around it? Should they go through it? What's the delay time on it? What's the speeds ahead? You know what I mean? Just to give them more information so that they can make educated choices moving forward.
Yeah, so I think what's important there, April, thanks, is that the pilot that Nate described briefly, and didn't steal any of our thunder, don't worry, is there. Started back in 2019, and that's wrapped up since. And I think one of the key spots for that work, and we collaborate with Dr. Larry Head down at the University of Arizona, is the work with the commercial sector. I fully believe data for work zones is important on a number of factors, but one of them being connecting with connected vehicles for a redundancy of information and added layer of safety to navigate a work zone. And I definitely see it on freeways where platooning of semi-autonomous vehicles could be one of the very first stages to actually be in full implementation on our roadways. And we look at California to Arizona, and even Arizona to then Texas are some great corridors to allow that. But then again, they have to work on the arterials to get off the freeway, to get into their loading and docking areas. So, I think that focus of that pilot being a lot on the commercial sector is definitely an angle and an aspect that will continue, like a theme that'll continue for sure as we develop these systems.
All right, so during the pilot demonstrations, we have one side that on the left side, you'll see the information generators. It comes from our construction group that has the work zone, plans. And then our traffic control plans are entered by our TMC staff. Again, very manual, very human natured. And then we have the work zone applications and devices consisting of the DMS signs, dynamic message signs, the travel time displays, the speed warnings, and then the camera feeds that are available to our TMC to see what's going on in that work zone. And then on the other side, all of that stuff is translated into information that our customers can actually use. The information is translated onto our AZ 511 website that's statewide. And then into the freight vehicles, the Swift vehicles through the DriveWise application, and then the autonomous vehicles, same thing on their in-vehicle displays. So that was a summary of kind of our pilot demonstration that Nate hit on earlier.
Yep, and I'll add that, and this is fine, you can keep going. In developing smart work zones at ADOT, there's always kind of a chicken egg question, and how much do you take on the whole bear and try to change the whole kind of function of how work zones are designed and implemented. And really, I just wanted to get smart work zones. We started with queue detection just to increase safety, but the entire time we've required that the data produced be in WZDX format. And the thought being that, right now we're not necessarily using it in the sense of, getting it to our 511 or a regional archive system. It's still very project by projects, and they're using the data to improve safety on the project. And we're looking at it after the fact internally at ADOT. but it's not the real-time aspect. But the great thing about this next grant that we're going to be working on, next two, hopefully, we'll be just taking the data that's already there and just moving it right into RADS. There's no extra formatting steps, changes to be done. It's there. So some of that looking ahead of where we want to be, even though you're not necessarily using it, is something to consider as you're developing your programs. Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing that Adam hit on that I think you'll hear throughout is we don't want to disrupt processes, right? So as we've done these pilot demonstrations, we've kind of buttoned up the way that we contract. For the construction folks that are used to dealing with large scale construction projects, they don't want another added thing to have to worry about through their contracting mechanisms and through, their workforce and stuff like that. So I think Adam has implemented some good processes as far as how to incorporate smart work zone technology and devices into existing construction projects without having to ask the construction group to do more. And then same thing on the data inputs. So this diagram shows all the local agencies in the Phoenix metropolitan area that have participated that are currently participating in our work zone data exchange program. And so you see that there's quite a few agencies on here. Some are larger than others. There are some agencies that are very small, right? And so like on the top, you see that they're sending us their work zone data information through Gmail, right? Just an email, and then it goes into a cloud and then pushed to an API, and then the process moves on. And then we have other entities in the red that are more GIS based. They have more detailed information. They're permitting construction. Software is more just modernized in a sense, right? And then we have other agencies that really don't have a process, but we're not going to turn anyone away. We really think that data is very valuable and something that only the local agencies and the state agencies can provide, and is not available to the bigger companies like Google or Waze. So we definitely have a lot of value in that information. So we accept it in all forms, and we didn't want these agencies to have to change their processes because they honestly probably didn't have the resources to do that. And we didn't want to push a certain application. So throughout, you'll just hear us talk about, accepting any data we can and work with it as best as we can. We process it through our regional archive data system, RADS, that's backed by our Aztec partnership. So that's a really key component as we move forward with our work zone data exchange program and projects.
Yeah, and I really got to commend McDOT, April, and her group for this work here specifically. As a reference, we do all of our safety data, say, is entered into our statewide system. And that's where a lot of funding can come from to do projects. And we still have cities and governments that just don't conform. And we've been pushing it for years, maybe even close to 10. And it's still. So for them just to openly say, hey, give us what there's no convincing, there's no politicals, just give me your data, I'll take it and make it work for literally the entire county of Maricopa, which if you're not familiar, there's all of those cities. I don't know, what are we, 4 million people? It's big. Mm-hmm. And so it's a lot of information, and just to willingly take that and move it, I don't think ADOT would have been able to make it happen as well as the county did. And that goes back to that partnership, leaning on each other's strengths. We've seen it recently in our grants. This current one that we're working on now that just started up, McDOT funded the in-kind match. The next one we're hoping to get, ADOT funded the in-kind match. So there's just the partnership just opens up people to use their strengths where at that time it's needed, and obviously provides for a lot more opportunities of success for sure. So thank you.
So we have 6 tasks associated with this new demonstration project. So we'll go over each one in a little bit more detail, but from this chart, you can see there's multiple different activities that are associated with each one of the, I guess there's technically 7 tasks, but they're mostly led by MCDOT and ADOT in partnership. And then our other partners, MAG, our MPO, Maricopa Association of Government is also involved. And then IAM, Institute of Automated Technology, IAM. So in task 1, it just includes the project management phase of it. We definitely have support from our consulting teams on helping guide us as we move through this project management stage and program. For task 1, we are going through and evaluating what our current processes are. We're summarizing them more collectively into one document, and then trying to demonstrate readiness as part of this task 2. Adam, do you want to talk about ADOT's current initiatives?
Sure. And I just wanted to clarify that, that this is all in regards to our next grant, which is what, if you refer to Nate's slides, the map of the United States of the brown, how we had a feed and have a feed that was established with our pilot. And now this is our next grant to kind of develop that feed. And I'm just going to go over that, how we're doing that a little more. But, smart work zones, I don't need to list these. You can look. And I think I've added more, to be honest with you. I've got a nice big list for my 3rd revision. Currently, we've just been adding to, not necessarily changing. There was some change on version 2. Which is the column on the right was added. The column on the right was added to the column on the left, or excuse me, that's vice versa. Anyway, right now the current specification is the outside columns. And then, but we did change the data security language slightly based on some discussions with our IT folks. And then, like I said, the new one, middle's coming. The idea here is twofold. It came out of our work zone safety and mobility work that we do, primarily the process reviews that are done every couple of years. That's a federal mandate under 23 CRF 630, if you're familiar with that. And we noticed right away that we don't really know how well we're doing. We don't have the data we need to evaluate our work zones, or that we want to evaluate our work zones at the level that we want. And so this is all about collecting data to create performance metrics and to make our work zones safer. Another thing that's important is a lot of focus right now on using smart work zones to make work zones safer. That's a big title of a lot of presentations I see. That focus is on improving mobility, and it's kind of a lagging metric there. And the fact that you improve mobility, you will improve safety. And another thing I'm looking at is hard braking events, something that is real-time safety that we can look for as an indicator of something that needs to be changed or can be evaluated, without waiting at, say, what happened last night, what's happening right now. And then, lastly, as I mentioned it before, is taking that data and then using what's needed to communicate with connected and autonomous vehicles. I think that's just an added great bonus. It's not necessarily what I was looking at when I first developed the program a few years ago. I was looking at purely safety improvements, but working through it and producing all the data, why not also use it for that effort too? So thank you, April.
All right, so the second task is associated with transitioning our current WZDX data feeds into the current WZDX 3.0 version. Just going through and documenting the design and the API implementation aspects. And then task 3 is associated with publishing the WZDX API and developing a viewer application. A lot of it, task 3 really focuses on visualization of the WZDX data. And we do it now, but it's more point data. And so we want a more robust viewer application where we could actually see the start and end points of where the construction zone actually is versus just a point on a map of it's here. And then task 4 is working with our regional partners from the public and private industries on a workshop, sharing lessons learned, sharing how the project is progressing, how we need to move forward, and just brainstorming improvements and new use cases for WZDX. And then just continuing on our engagement with the private and industries, we definitely partner with IAM quite a bit, Institute of Automated Mobility, offering their existing platforms with helping to engage the public and private partners and bringing everyone together. Task 5 is about the data feed metrics, documenting some of the key metrics associated with this project, the accuracy, the volume, timeliness of the information, and determining what metrics should be added to WZDX. And then 6 is a summary report and presentation summarizing the outcomes of the project. And so this is a schedule of where we currently are with the project. You can see that it's over the course of 12 months. We've pretty much just kicked off the project. So we're definitely still in task number 1, assessing institutional processes, going through and summarizing our own processes, also going through and summarizing what others across the nation are doing and how those lessons learned should be carried over to our project. And so it's anticipated that the project will be completed by the end of 2022. And so we've gone through and summarized who is included in this project. You can see on the executive level, we have many leads from MCDOT, ADOT, MAG, our local MPO, and then FHWA as well. And we've also gone through and identified our technical team to help lead this project and move it forward. So again, it's a mix of MCDOT folks, ADOT folks that are leading it, and other people from Dr. Larry Head from the University of Arizona. We have strong partnerships with our universities, and we want to continue that because we recognize the value that they bring on a research level and implementation level when it comes to projects like this and moving forward. So again, here are our local agency partners that are included in this project. You can see there's several different local agencies that are involved. Maricopa County is very different in the sense of we work together very collaboratively to move things forward. And, you know, the Aztec Regional Partnership, it started in 1996 and it's still carried forward. You know, it's a group of volunteers that have, you know, like-kind thinking and want to see transportation technologies be successful in our area. And so we're only able to do it through strong, you know, support from our champions and as people move on, educating those new folks that come into our workforce on why projects like this are important and keeping them engaged. And so that's all Adam and I had today.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I wouldn't characterize it as that's all you had. That's a tremendous amount of information. Very, very useful. I do, for those that weren't joining us this morning, this is being recorded. This will be made available on the Clearinghouse website. So for those that want to go back and you know, pick up some more additional information, that'll be available there, as well as I think contact information for both Adam and April. So I thank you both for an outstanding presentation. Corey, let's go ahead and bring you up and hear about what's going on in Massachusetts. Okay.
Thanks, Gerald. Can you hear me? Okay.
You're great. You sound great.
All right, let me just share my screen here. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys some of the updates from the Smart Work Zone subgroup of the Work Zone Data Exchange. Hopefully some of the items that our subgroup are doing can be pertinent to your states. I think even Arizona might be able to have some of the stuff come out of the stuff that we are doing to help you guys. So again, my name is Corey O'Connor. I'm a traffic operations engineer at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. So real quick, the purpose of our subgroup, the Smart Work Zone subgroup, is to take the current work zone data exchange specification, which is right now mostly focused on standard specification language for static work zone devices, and to expand it to include smart work zone devices as well as dynamic data. Smart work zones today, this is just a little bit background of how we got to where we're at today. So again, smart work zones today, they consist of variable message signs, traffic sensors, cameras, etc. All these devices are collecting data from the roadway. And this data is being used to trigger events and displayed on dynamic message signs such as stop traffic ahead, back at you warning, or travel time information. Then a lot of these smart work zones usually have a smart work zone manager application that goes along with them. This is where operators can log in and view the data as well as change the messages on the message boards. And for the most part, today this is all done using vendor-specific equipment. So vendor-specific field devices communicating to vendor-specific smart work zone manager applications. So you can see as we get more and more work zones throughout the state with various vendors, this creates the need to log into multiple smart work zone vendor or applications, to view the data. So kind of highlights the issue that there is no common language that these smart work zone field devices speak. Then finally, kind of on the side of smart work zones, for static work zone manager applications, if your state has a static work zone manager application, a lot of the data that's put in there, such as lane closed or the status of the work zone, that is currently done manually. So our future goal is to basically develop a common API language for all smart work zone devices. This is so that their data can be digested by DOTs or other third parties, such as mapping companies and even connected vehicles. So common smart work zone API language allows the smart work zone devices from different vendors to be pulled into one location. So DOTs can manage all the smart work zones from one work zone manager app. And then for the third parties and connected vehicles, it allows them to easily digest the information from these smart work zone devices so that they can either, you can get the information on your GPS in your car, or the connected vehicles can use it to do whatever they need to do to travel through the work zone. And then looking on the dynamic data side of things, another vision that we have is, for the states that have the static work zone manager applications, we can hope that some of the data can start being automatically updated into the application. For example, location markers, you can mark the start end of a work zone, and also when the work zone starts, and then hopefully this data can be automatically uploaded into your work zone manager application. Or even a smart arrow board, put a smart arrow board out there, activate it, and then maybe the smart work zone manager application can automatically be updated to say that a lane is closed instead of a user inputting that data in. So MassDOT recognized the need for a common smart work zone application language as we're developing our own smart work zone manager application. So we're developing our own smart work zone manager application. So it became pretty obvious, or the need became pretty obvious, that we need one common language for all these smart work zone devices so that our application can digest the information. So we created a smart work zone vendor API specification to specify that language so that we can pull in information from all these various smart work zones across the state from various vendors. We can pull in all that data into our smart work zone manager tool. So when the US DOT's Work Zone Data Exchange demonstration grant came around back in July 2020, it was kind of a natural decision for us to apply for it so we could share our current specification and expand it so it can be better used across the country for smart work zone devices and dynamic data. So the vision for this grant was to use MassDOT's already developed the vendor API specification, engage with stakeholders across the country, get feedback and ideas, and expand the API specification so that it can be used by any vendor or any DOT across the country. And this, of course, builds off the current work zone data exchange specification. So MassDOT was awarded the grant, and we formed the Smart Work Zone subgroup underneath the Smart Work Zone Data Exchange. The 3 co-chairs, we have Ben Asinovich from Colorado DOT, Neil Boudreau, who's actually my boss from Mass DOT, and Todd Foster, who is the Vice President of ITS Engineering in Vermac. Then our subgroup has 60 members from various forms of government, state, federal, county, and local agencies, universities, a whole bunch of private entities, including equipment vendors, manufacturers, GPS and navigation providers, auto manufacturers, ITS software integrators, transportation planning, and engineering firms. So here's just a little bit more detail on the subgroup's objectives. So again, we are using the current work zone data exchange specification. So the first step was to go to that specification and open up a new branch for the smart work zone effort. Then subgroup had to decide what data it's going to include in the specification. And it had to decide what field devices to include, including their configuration details and the type of data that those field devices will provide. Then we had to implement all of these new field devices and the new data into the existing work zone data exchange specification using the GitHub repository. And then finally, subgroup would have to develop some examples and validate the specification. So just real quick, I know Nate touched upon this. GitHub. GitHub is the platform where the work zone data exchange specifications are being developed. So this is where the Smart Work Zone subgroup goes to. This is kind of our collaboration platform to talk with our subgroup. We post issues, we post pull requests, and just get comments and feedback from everybody through the GitHub application. So this is finally getting a little bit into the meat of what we're doing. Here's a very high-level glimpse of the work that the Smart Work Zone subgroup has done so far. This is a list of all the Smart Work Zone devices that are currently being integrated into the new Smart Work Zone specification. Again, this is our current list. We hope to do a few more rounds of this. So this is just what we have for now. But currently what we have is, we have arrow boards, we have cameras, we have dynamic message signs, flashing beacons, hybrid signs, location markers, and traffic sensors. So these seven devices are what we're focusing on developing standard specification language for. And then each of those devices has a set of properties that it reports on. This is just an example of some of the properties for an arrow board. So for example, core details, the pattern of the arrow board, is it moving? That kind of, gives a hint of, is it a mobile operation or not? And is it in transport position? So as, a lot of others were saying, we want this to be very open and easy to integrate so that any state DOT can use this specification. So some of the conformance properties are optional. So if your state does not use this property, or it just doesn't work in your state because you guys don't use that property, a lot of properties are optional, so they're not required properties. This is just a flow chart that shows the current vision of how the Smart Work Zone data can get from the side of the highway to the DOT or third party, eventually to the traveling public. So you have your field devices, whether it be the camera or smart arrow board or whatnot. So that will communicate to the equipment manufacturer or vendor, just in the same way that it does today. Then it is up to the equipment manufacturer or vendor to report that data up to the DOT or the third party using the new Smart Work Zone data feed. So this is the focus of the subgroup right here, is this communication between the equipment vendor and the DOT or the third party. Then the DOT or third party could be a mapping company such as Google or Waze or whatnot. So DOT or third party can then transmit that data out to the traveling public onto your GPS currently, or obviously in the future, connected and autonomous vehicles. So where do we stand right now? This is just a quick milestone timeline. So we started back in July 2021. This is when we presented MassDot's existing Smart Work Zone API to the subgroup members, and we got lots of feedback from them, and we got a lot of good recommendations. So we started implementing these recommendations back in August of 2021, and then continued to work with subgroup members to iron out some issues in September. And right now, in mid-October at this point, we're doing a QA/QC of the new API, and actually beginning discussions of how we're going to incorporate the new specification into the existing WorkZone data exchange specification. And in November, we have to do a big update at the semi-annual WorkZone device working group meeting. And then finally, in December 2021, we hope to kick off round 2. So speaking of round 2, which kicks off in December 2021, so we're not able to cover everything in the first go around. We only had those 7 devices that we were able to get specification or API specifications for. So there's much more to do. So here's just a short list of a few of the items that were not addressed in the first go around that we hope to approach in the second go around. So we are always looking for more input. If you have any ideas or recommendations, we'd love to hear them and have you join our subgroup. So if there's any interest, you can just email Nate or Michelle. Michelle's from IBI Group, who's the group that's helping us write the specification. You can just email one of those two, and we're happy to get you aboard. So with that kind of sums up a just very high level overview of the progress that we made to this date. If you want any more updates, feel free to use any of these resources. You can actually go onto GitHub and dive into any of the specifications, and you can go as deep as you want. So, but that's all I have. So thanks for letting me give the update.
Great. Thanks, Corey. Again, a great amount of information here. We've got just a couple minutes. I've got a couple of Q&As here we want to go through. It looks like our panelists are asking each other questions here, so that this is, I think, will be interesting. The first one came in, Adam, and actually, I think this was directed towards Nate, and it had to deal with, what's the group, the whole working group, what's its status in the future going forward as far as privatization or not?
Yeah, and that's still a work in progress. It's been we've kind of had a few open conversations among members about what they want to see happen, whether it transitions over to a more traditional standards development organization like an SAE or an ITE, or whether it kind of stays where it is under the WorkZone Data Working Group as an open kind of community-led group. So TBD. We'll give a little bit more of an answer and solicit a little more input in early November, but it's very much a work in progress.
Okay.
What follow-up, I guess, would be, I guess, impartial as you can be, what would be your preference, or what would be advantages of going one way or the other? And because I think it's been moving fairly well. Of course, a lot of heavy lifting by a few individuals, and maybe a different group would have more capacity to do something more. But what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the current approach is worked really well, right? I mean, we're approaching version 4 of the specification, so 5 update cycles. It's been stable since version 2. So for the last 3 years. So even if you were putting out version 3.1 now, you wouldn't be, your data would be usable, and will continue to be usable for the foreseeable future. So staying as it is a perfectly functional approach. There's some stability offered by a more conventional standards body. And I know there's some interest in both SAE and ITE working together to do some connected work zone standardization, which would kind of bring WZDX a little more in line with the connected vehicle roadside safety message work, which also touches on work zone information, and kind of some alignment and reference guidance there would kind of be the bridge to the future, I think. So I'm kind of all over the place. How's that?
Great. I think we have one more question, but I think we've got to move on. So I'm going to ask Matt to take us back. Thank you all for the presentations, outstanding information, and I'll turn it back over to Matt.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and all the presenters. I was outstanding. Please do me a favor, turn off your cameras and mics and go ahead and exit the stage. And now I'd like to ask Brad Sant from ARTBA to come up. He is going to be the moderator for our next session, Active Work Zone Management in Indiana, using connected vehicle data. So Brad, come on up onto the stage for me. And hopefully Brad is out there. Let me double check, make sure you issues.
You know what, Matt? We can just take it from here.
There's Brad. Here we are. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So hi, Brad.
Hey, hello everybody. And I was having some connection issues, so looks like my camera's not quite here, but I can go ahead and do those introductions and turn it over to you folks. So thank you so much, Richard and Darcy, for being here. We have a really interesting presentation for us this afternoon on some great experiences in Indiana and what they've been doing there and beyond. So quickly, let me introduce. First, we're going to hear from Richard Hedgecock. He's the president of Indiana Constructors, Inc., and that's the state's premier heavy highway utility and trade association. With over 200 member companies statewide representing thousands of construction professionals, ICI enjoys a strong position in the marketplace as the voice for the construction industry. ICI flies the flag in Indiana for both ARTBA and AGC of America, and Richard's background includes stints as a private sector lobbyist, chief of staff for a member of Congress, and as a trade association executive. He's joined by Darcy Bullock of Purdue University, and Darcy is the Lyles Professor or Family Professor of Civil Engineering at Purdue University and serves as the director of the Joint Transportation Research Program. Mr. Bullock is a registered professional engineer in Indiana and has 30 years of experience in working closely with academia, transportation agencies, and private partners like the Indiana Construction Association in the area of transportation systems and data analytics. So take it away, gentlemen.
Thanks, Brad. So as Brad said, I'm a trade association executive, and as such, I'm in the public policy arena much more than I am in the arena of science and data. As all of you know, government reacts to a crisis. And about 3 years ago, we had a particularly horrific accident in Indianapolis. A woman and her twin daughters were both killed on a Sunday morning as they sat and stalled traffic at a work zone. The governor was particularly incensed. It was pretty bad. And so he gathered together the DOT and ourselves, and we put together a working group made up of those entities along with the state police, the trucking association, designers, and others. And we brought in our other presenter here today, Darcy Bullock, to serve as sort of our leader. And we have been focusing on queues and on speed. And Darcy today is going to tell you about the implementation that we've started of queue trucks, specialized paint and light jobs on trucks that are used moving back and forth as queues accordion in and out, and how we determine where those things go based on hard-breaking data. So Darcy, why don't you kind of take it from there, and I'll maybe prod you along the way with a couple of questions.
That would be fantastic. Richard, can you give me a thumbs up? You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think fantastic setup, Richard, for the context of the problem. I think this is a nationwide problem. And I guess I would, as we go through this, Richard and I have quite a bit of either videos or papers that we can share. So both of our email addresses are up there, and we'll have the slide up again at the end, but feel free to reach out to us afterwards. So with that, I'll kind of jump in. Terms of the message for this group. I don't think I need to convince you that work zone crashes are a national problem, not only for the construction industry, but the users and the travelers on our nation's highway system. I think Richard alluded to what I think we're very proud of here in Indiana is, and I say Indiana is kind of a royal we involving government, academia, and industry. I think the group that Richard and INDOT have pulled together, it's really been very rewarding to see this team work together, bringing in connected vehicle data, and I'll talk a little bit about what we can learn from connected vehicle data, and use that as a source of information for managing our work zones. And before I jump into the work zones, I mean, it's hard to imagine, now we use connected vehicle data all the time, but it's hard to imagine 10 years ago the connected vehicle data being so impactful in the work zone community. So I think it's worth taking a little bit of a deeper dive into that connected vehicle data. And Richard, really hope you kind of prod me as we go through this, so we get a little bit of discussion going. But if there's one message that I want to, there's probably two messages I want you to take away from this. One is the connected vehicles out there are a critical piece of information that we need to use to most effectively manage our work zones from kind of a traffic safety and a traffic efficiency perspective. And the other part is I'm going to share how INDOT and Richard's colleagues have used that data to get tangible results. And the kind of the spoiler alert or the jump message that we're going to get to at the end is we saw an 80% reduction in hard braking in queues approaching work zone. And we would not have been able to have done that without connected vehicle data. I say connected vehicle data, and this data that I'm going to share with Indiana, describing Indiana, scales to any state in the country. In fact, we've done some analysis in PennDOT, Ohio, TxDOT. So if anybody's kind of interested in some offline discussion, feel free to follow up with us. But in summary, we ingest about 11 billion connected vehicle records per month. On a peak Friday afternoon, that's about 10,000 records per second. And that's the challenge with that type of data. It's big data, so it could be data rich, information poor. So what we've had to work closely with Richard and INDOT and the partners is how do we take that really big data and get it into what I often like to say is a picture book approach to traffic engineering. And so I hope one of the things you leave this talk today with is an understanding of how we use the connected vehicle data to deploy these what we call queue trucks. And I might just pause for a second right here, just so it's not a monologue. And if Richard maybe want to make a comment on the queue truck and how the industry kind of arose together as a partner to develop these in collaboration with INDOT. So Richard, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but maybe give us 30-second, 1-minute perspective on that.
So as we were looking for solutions on queue warning, we looked around the country and found a couple of states that had implemented the use of queue trucks. And the idea of a queue truck is to have a vehicle that, again, moves with the queue as it shrinks or grows. We actually put them in Indiana out in pairs so that they can leapfrog one another as traffic changes and there's no one backing up on the shoulder. But they are manned with an attenuator. They're manned with specific, special, bright paint and strobes and lighting, unlike other warning devices that are out there. They can be seen on a flat road. They can be seen. I swear to you, I talked to somebody in Darcy today who said they came on one of these jobs just over the weekend and they saw it about 5 miles away. So they are very effective in catching the eye and in getting the driver engaged, which, as we know, is a continual problem in just engaging the alertness of the driver.
Excellent context, Richard. And I think Richard kind of highlighted message boards, warning signs, but they have a really good strobe package on it. So Richard, I don't doubt that 5 miles. I particularly on some of the ice, I've driven I-70 a lot lately, and some of those peaks and valleys, you can really see it a lot. And then the other, we'll jump a little bit ahead to this, but we've actually broadened. Initially, we were just using the Haas alert for injecting digital alerts into Waze and so on, but we've actually broadened the participation. We actually, iCones has a system, and there's a couple others out there. So I'll dive in a little bit more detail on that. So kind of the topics and the motivation that we're gonna talk through is I'm gonna show you some examples. Just for context, in terms of work zone crashes, and I don't have 2020 data, and 2020 data probably will be a little squirrely, but we have somewhere north of 100,000 crashes a year in work zones every year, and somewhere north of 700 fatal crashes. And large proportion of those involve not just the workers in the work zone, but the traveling public. And that's the message that Richard alluded to at the beginning of the talk with Governor Holcomb and Commissioner McGinnis, saying, let's come together and let's see if we can kind of work together to improve the safety on Indiana highways. And when you start looking at crashes in work zones, and the insurance industry has known this correlation between hard braking and crashes for a number of years. That's why you're starting to see many of the insurance providers give people credit for putting in these dongles in their vehicles that monitor their driving habits. But we looked at the rear end collision in work zones in 2019, and we said, hey, can we do something to provide some advanced warning in the approaching a queue to a work zone, so that we don't get in that situation of real hard braking, as Richard said, that just driver inattention. We got to wake the driver up. Interstates, particularly rural sections, can be a challenging section to keep drivers engaged. Tennessee has been a very strong thought leader in this space, and if anybody's on the line from Tennessee, I guess I just want to tell you guys thank you, because I think you inspired some incredible efforts that Indiana colleagues we've come along and adopted. And we had used 2020 as somewhat of a prototyping year, but in April, and this is a slide from the same event that I had Richard on, the first slide, this is Commissioner McGinnis. We kind of came together and just before Work Zone Awareness Week and kicked off this initiative down at the State House. And the team analogy gets used a lot, but boy, this would not be possible. When you start looking at all the stakeholders here, none of the stakeholders came to the table dragging their feet. They all came together, rolling up their sleeves. And I would say that really is a testament of Commissioner McGinnis, Richard Hedgecock, and them kind of setting the tone and say, okay, how do we work together as a team to address this event, or how to address this problem? So when we start looking at the work zones out there, I'm going to share with you specifics about the I-65 construction work zone. It's this area is nominally halfway between Chicago and Indianapolis. It's in the greater Lebanon area, if anybody's familiar with that. Not really terribly important in terms of geographic area, other than we're in somewhat of a suburban rural area where there's an opportunity for somewhat inattentive driving. And I'm going to show you a 10-mile stretch from mile marker 130 to 150. Actually, there's a southbound direction, so mile marker 150 to 130. So this is a two 10-mile sections or 20 miles. And again, I don't need to tell this audience mile markers, but Richard and I share this talk many times with the general public, and just reminding them where they are. And I'm going to call out the mile markers. This is 145.8, approaching the work zone. You can see some of the orange barrels. And you can see as we're getting into the work zone, this is actually just prior to queuing starting, but you can kind of see that this is an area where there is going to be some congestion and some queuing. So this is a really dense slide that I'm going to try to unwrap, and I really hope this is where I bring Richard back into the dialogue, because I think I joke I like a picture book approach to traffic engineering. And so I'm kind of showing you the big picture up front, and then we're going to kind of dissect this. And I really do believe in the next 10 or 12 minutes, my goal is to have everybody in the audience be able to read this chart. And Richard has taught even the most diehard doubters in the construction industry to read these charts. So Richard, I've set the bar high for you on this webinar.
I will say, Darcy, that when my people my members were charged with adding queue trucks, actually putting people as the first line of defense with the traveling public, there was quite a bit of hesitation. But when Darcy was able to come back with empirical data after a pilot program to show an 80% reduction in hard braking, our people had to kind of throw up their hands and say, well, I guess we're going to do this. We already had a question, in fact, Darcy, on automated queue trucks, and we are aware of the existence of those entities, but we're still relatively in our infancy, and frankly, I don't know that our people want to go to the cost of buying a fleet of automated vehicles, unless the DOT wanted to do that on their own, and then I'd say go for it.
And I'll add, Richard, we're all in on doing an evaluation if some other state wants to do it too. So, yeah. Good dialogue. So what I want you to read on these heat maps is I talked about the Lebanon construction zone from mile marker 150 down to 130. And so this heat map is showing mile marker 150 to 130. So I'm showing you 20 miles of interstate, and I'm showing you it in the southbound direction. And then across the bottom are time ticks, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., 8 a.m., 10 a.m., all the way through midnight. And then along the bottom, and this is kind of the whole key to reading this, green is good, red is bad. Reds and purples are bad. When we see on this diagram, we can see the work zone is at about mile marker 140. And we can see that, pick your number right now, probably about 7 p.m. is when the queuing starts. And that queuing extends from maybe mile marker 141 back to 145. So it's about a 4-mile queue. And we can see that purple is that 0 to 14 miles an hour. And then all of these queue trucks have telematics on them. So this purple line shows early deployment. They're upstream before the queue started, and then the queue starts. They follow the back of the queue, and then we can kind of look at now over the queuing pattern over Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and you can see kind of a repetitive pattern. About 7 p.m. is about when the queuing starts out there. And we may have varying conditions. And what we're really worried about right here is this back of queue. We're worried about the drivers coming in and having to change abruptly from 65 miles an hour down to 0 to 14. So what we do is we overlay on this hard braking. So these are the other events that we get in from connected vehicle data. So all the speed data has been coming in, and we've been doing this maybe for 10 years here in Indiana. Certainly the Northeast states I-95 corridor. You guys have been looking at speed profiles versus time on interstates for a number of years. But the other thing we've also done is we've brought in these red dots, which are these hard braking events. And now I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit more detail on that. So the thing that's kind of remarkable, I'm just going to toggle back and forth. These purple lines are where the Q trucks are. And you can just compare and contrast. Here we had an unplanned incident and we see 9 hard braking events. But look here, over an entire evening there, just 2 hard braking events. So the question we went into this is, we know that hard braking events are highly correlated with crashes. The insurance industry's shown us that. We did our own study in 2019 and showed that we get about 1 crash at the back of a queue in a work zone for every 147 hard braking events. So our central performance measure going into this is, can we reduce those hard braking events? Because if we can reduce the hard braking events, we can reduce the number of crashes. So I'm going to show you just in one corridor a couple examples, and then I'm going to kind of do the Julia Child and roll up several hundred hours of analysis. But when you just compare these 2 work zones, this particular, or these queuing conditions, we see this location out here had 2 hard braking events, and that purple line indicates there's a queue truck there. We look over here, we had 9 hard braking events in 3 hours. Here we had 2 hard braking events in 5 hours. Now let me show you just a little bit more example of where this might come into play, and then I want to loop back with kind of the summary of how this can work beyond work zone. So we also are using this same concept with what we call Hoosier Helpers, or what some areas call, in Illinois, I think call them Minutemen or Motorist Assistance Patrol. We put some digital alerts in. We looked at 2 different events on I-65. One was on May 26th. Another one was on May 27th. They're both at the same time of day. This event on May 26th, we had 3 hard braking events over, pick your number there, 6 hours. Over here, we had 29 hard braking events when we didn't have a queue truck present. So that particular case, there's maybe like it's in that 80 to 90% reduction. So what we did is we said, okay, let's look at 430 hours. So every one of these dots up here are queuing conditions, and we looked at a collection of work zone conditions where we did not have the queue warning trucks with navigation alerts deployed. Those are the red circles. And then the green ones are when we had the presence of queue trucks out there with the navigation alerts. And this is that kind of foreshadowing that I had at the beginning and Richard alluded to, is when we put these trucks out there, we went from kind of this line to this line, or we saw an 80% reduction in hard braking events. And coming back to what the insurance industry talks about in terms of relationship between hard braking and crashes, this is highly significant. So Richard, maybe any color commentary before I got a little example on I-70 I was going to share with them, but I thought it might be good for you to add a comment or two here.
No, I think that again, it's significant enough that our people, we had an opportunity last summer on a very long stretch that had several contracts associated with it to do almost a laboratory of different traffic management devices and see what worked best in combination with other things. And it was Q trucks, and it was intelligent systems, and it was the presence of blue lights, whether that be through the state police or through using local law enforcement. And mixing and matching those things are all going to be unique to every job. Every job is going to be different, obviously. And so the fact that we have all these things now at our disposal, and more importantly, are now have the data that we can show where these things work best together, has been a great improvement for us. Darcy, we've had a couple of very persistent people asking in Q&A, what type of data are you collecting from the connected vehicles, and how are you collecting and managing it? And then someone asked, can hard braking be discerned from probe data? That is, sudden changes in reported speeds.
Okay, so excellent question. Let me just, if you give me like 3 more minutes, Richard, to kind of, I slipped a few slides in here. I just want to show the Q truck in action on I-70, and then I'll answer those questions. So I'm just going to kind of show a data set. I sent the students out with a GoPro driving I-70, and this is a section just to the east of Indianapolis. And I think this really kind of alludes to that gentleman's question on probe data. So what you're seeing right here, Richard, is connected vehicle data. The particular data I'm showing here is the WEJO connected data. We also use the INRIX data. So, you know, this is one of those things, a little bit talking like religion with people in terms of which data sets to use. But every one of these lines up here, Richard, is a vehicle going through the work zone. And this is from August 29th. We also keep track of travel time through the work zone. And you can see the vehicles. So the query that we had from your chat was, is that probe data? Yes, it's probe data. We're seeing in Indiana approximately 5% of the vehicles that are using our interstate are connected vehicles that we can characterize within 1/10 of a mile where that back of queue is. So, Richard, I hope I've shown here graphically individual vehicles coming through here and the time slices all the way down to, you can even see like small hiccups in here. This probably might have been like a little fender bender where people, the probe stopped for a little bit and the queue built and then kept going. And then the other thing this showed on here is these red, sometimes this particular display shows red triangles, but these are hard braking events that occur at the back of the queue. So in summary, I gave a very long-winded answer to that question that the colleague entered in the chat. 5% of the vehicles driving through our work zones on the interstate are connected. That gives us sufficient data to know where the queues are certainly within 1/10 of a mile or maybe even a little bit better. And in addition to that speed and velocity, we do bring in event data from hard braking. Now there's one other that the chat person really has some deep knowledge on this. We can actually do the derivative on the velocity and come up with hard braking. We've done that. It's a little noisy. We actually just like getting in this event data, mainly because it's calibrated to 0.27 G. It simplifies our life a little bit, but it is possible to derive hard braking from the trajectory. So Richard, I hope I didn't go, that was a really deep question that I wanted to make sure I gave a good answer to from a real work zone on I-70.
Hey, Darcy, I'm just a flack. I'm not a scientist, and I even followed you.
Okay. Are there other questions coming in, or do you want me to show you the rest of the path on this route?
No, so far you're doing great.
Okay, so this is actually, I'm going to kind of show you, you made the comment, Richard, on being able to see these quite a distance apart. And I actually was if I show this, you can actually see with the naked eye, it's a little speck there. I'm just going to show you the GoPro image. And if we look right here, This is August 29th at 5:54 p.m. We're going by the students are driving by the Q truck. The little moving map up here is an icon there, and I'm just going to tap. As they went through, they had the Waze alert. They'd actually see that ahead of time, but that Waze alert was on. I'm just showing you where their position is relative to the Waze alert. So now I'm gonna, as we're 2 seconds. Watch the little timer down here, 21 seconds, and we're approaching the queue. And they've joined the queue there 36 seconds after passing the truck. Now, your point is very well taken, is these trucks are highly visible. So 5 miles away, it might be a little bit of a curiosity to the uninformed eye, but certainly 1 mile ahead, 1 minute ahead, you've got a very clear view of some bright strobes. We have the Waze alerts coming into the vehicles. This is the new frontier. I started out this talk talking about, our cars know more about our infrastructure than we do. The other part of that equation is we've got to work collectively as a group to talk with the auto industry. How do we systematically get these messages in a uniform way? We have the manual and uniform traffic control devices on how we put out work zone signs, but there's no equivalent on how we get that into the car. And we really need to be looking at that.
That's the thing that we continue to try to wrap our brains around is we do so much as an industry visually to catch the driver's attention. But as we all know, there is so much competition within the cab of a vehicle for the driver's attention that if we can get inside that cab with something in an audio related or on the screen that they're fixated with in the middle of their newer vehicles, that's the way to get to the driver. That's the way to get the driver's attention is auditory and on the screens in the newer vehicles.
Could not agree with you more. And so, the constituents that we have here on the phone, I think it's good that we in Indiana are working in this space. But if we can start getting a few of our peer states together, the Federal Highway has a mechanism called the pool fund study mechanism. We've been very successful with that in some other areas. That's something, Richard, I'd toss out if people are interested in maybe getting together with Indiana. Richard, I think we could certainly get a constituents together with INDOT to team together with some states, because the auto industry doesn't want 50 different standards coming into the car. Google doesn't want 50 different standards. If we can start collectively getting together, we're all going to benefit. The state DOTs and the stakeholders that help us provide that information into the vehicle. So with that, I hope I kind of summarized the concept of the Q truck and demonstrated that there's very strong evidence. You don't just believe us. Look at the insurance industry. They pay out real dollars on claims. They place a high value on reducing hard braking events. And if we can reduce our hard braking events by 80%, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're going to go a long ways towards reducing our crashes by 80%, because and the good thing about the hard braking data is, as you saw from the plot that I showed up there, we can snap that down to a couple hundred feet. If anybody's gone through crash reports, the public safety officers out there investigating crashes are first worried about the safe management of the scene, making sure no additional injuries, getting the emergency in and out. Crash reports oftentimes don't get written up until after they're off the scene, and many times we don't get really good location data. And so the other thing that the hard braking and the connected vehicle data is, it gives us really, really timely, actionable information. This data is coming in real time. We see this we look at this every day, and once a week we put out a summary report to INDOT on this. So with that, I think we've kind of got through the formal part of the presentation, and I'm hoping we got some more questions in this, because webinars are a team audience, and I see some familiar names out there. So it wouldn't, if I'm in class, I tend to call on people. I won't quite do that with the webinar. So maybe we get some chat questions.
Darcy, we have been asked by somebody, this seems like a great system for open highways, but how does it apply to an inner city highway where the road is winding between buildings and on and off ramps may only be like a quarter of a mile apart?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I would say, in terms of the analytics, one of the things that oftentimes is quite interesting in those urban areas is you have closely spaced interchanges. And I think by looking at the connected vehicle data, many times in urban areas, one of the things that can be helpful is to close interchanges so that you don't have weaving real close to a work zone. So maybe the Q trucks don't necessarily fit in an urban area, but I absolutely believe the connected vehicle data can be used to assess that. And we've seen that I-70 between Minneapolis and Richmond, they've actually closed some of those interchanges. So I would say the connected vehicle data, either for identifying potential risks or monitoring how things might be operating, I'd a lot rather look at some hard braking events coming up rather than wait for a dozen crashes to pile up.
We have another question. Some other people expressed interest in on the actual practical application of the truck. So, Darcy, when we have a contract that calls for let me say this back up. When we have a contract that calls for the Q trucks, as I said earlier, are always administered in pairs. That is one of the things that we insisted on going into this experiment, because we didn't want trucks that were, going forward and backward on the interstate. So their initial placement, and Darcy, you can please help me with this. Their initial placement in relation to a work zone is based on the data that's collected and transmitted or sent then to the traffic management center with NDOT, and they can determine thereby where the typical queue is going to start in any given day and time. Is that correct, Darcy?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of that. And Richard, I'm just going to pull up just to kind of talk about that concept of data. So I'm pulling up I-70 right now, and I'm just going to pull up the last 5 days, and this is I-70 runs east-west. This is a section between nominally Indianapolis and Dayton, and Richard, you can see on Thursday and Friday pretty consistent patterns. A little bit different on Saturday and Sunday. With this whole COVID thing and people telecommuting on Monday, sometimes Mondays and Fridays are a little bit different than what they used to be. And then I'm going to turn on the Q trucks, the purple lines. And you're absolutely right. We absolutely deploy them in pairs, and you can see kind of that pair movement, and they work together as a team. So
it's intuitive. I mean, you set up in your initial spot.
Yep.
As the queue grows and reaches and eventually surpasses that initial truck, the second one is deployed to come behind and establish itself, and then the original lead truck moves forward, takes the exit, loops back around, so it can then be the follow truck, and it again a leapfrog type situation. Absolutely. As far as the decision-making criteria on the Q trucks themselves and when they're determined they're going to be used, that's in fact just this week. the gentleman I work with NDOT on this, has provided us the list of, I think there's going to be only 10 jobs next year that are going to require Q trucks, and those are in the specs and in the plans and in the lettings that go out, so they know ahead of time whether it's going to be a Q truck involved job or not. They base that on historical information of where it is, interstate only, length of the job, all those sorts of things that they know through all their past history of where they've done things, of where they're going to anticipate large queues.
Absolutely. And, I was just showing you right there, there was one that got leapfrogged and they jumped around, swung back around. So I can't overstate how important it is that the Q truck driver is not the lowest person on the totem pole. You really want to have a team effort between the drivers and just kind of a little bit of, it's not just go out there and park beside the road. There is that active, and that's where your constituents, Richard, have been so good on just kind of putting, some can-do people in the driver's seat there.
So as Darcy said, we would love to have an opportunity to eventually get to where we have some consistency within the industry, state to state to state, so that the messages that are coming through Waze and others are consistent, that the driver knows what to do when they see that consistent message. Darcy, you want to build on that?
Yeah, and it really becomes important across state lines. I mean, I'll throw one last. I pulled in. We looked at the most hard breakings we had in the state for our work zone report last week, and 8094 popped up, and this was actually a construction zone in Chicago, in the Illinois area, across the border. And so when you start looking, Richard, this probably makes your toenails curl when you look at all of those hard braking events. And so not only is it consistency amongst states, but we have construction projects at the border, and the coordination and the messaging. We've got it down. We know how to coordinate on like putting barricades in each other's states. But we have definitely got a lot of work to do in that space on how we start communicating and messaging that on vehicle. And, put this in context, Richard, to travel 12 miles, it was taking people 2.5 hours going that way. So, and you can just see that back of the queue there on Saturday, and you can just see the outline of that. Every one of those is a potential crash.
Adam, I'm responding to your point on putting a person in the role. We 100% agree with you on that. And in fact, we are, I don't like our people being the first line of defense. And automated Q trucks, yes, that's a possibility. To me, I believe that the eventual answer is going to be in intelligent sign systems and done in relation with some of these Waze warnings. I have concerns from the human aspect of it. I have concerns from the liability aspect of it. But we can't deny the effectiveness of these as the interim step to get to eventually where we want to go.
Could not agree with you more, Richard. And this is absolutely a situation we have balanced risk. This is a very sad story. I mean, we got to make sure we look at that whole system. Zero risk for one person doesn't necessarily mean minimizing risk for the entire system. And this is, as you're well aware, very sad crash in Tippecanoe County associated with a construction zone. we had an inattentive driver V1 tractor trailer came in and pushed one vehicle off, impacted a second tractor trailer, and then squashed the vehicles. And we had 2 fatalities in that vehicle that was stopped doing everything right. So anything we can do to kind of wake that driver up without creating undue risk for the construction workers is it's a balance problem we got to work together on.
You know, I have frustratingly been pushing automated speed enforcement in work zones here in Indiana. I know that there are now 7 states that do it at some level, and we continue to pursue legislation on that. But it's a hard slog. It's very difficult for people to they somehow feel a privacy issue is being breached by asking them to slow down from a camera rather than from an individual in a blue car. So I think all of these things are where we need to head. And I think that technology is going to help us get there. Technology has gotten us into this problem because that's what's distracting everyone. And so we have to use technology to get us out of this problem.
Absolutely. Well stated.
Darcy, I think that's about all that I've see. Nate, I would suggest that you contact Darcy by email on some of your specific points about the pooled systems. Anything in the pipeline that would govern vehicle speed in certain situations based on observations. Pipeline that would govern vehicle speed. So I guess, Karina, what you're asking is probably what I was talking about, is we would love to have the ability in the state of Indiana, as they have in 7 other jurisdictions, to allow the use of automated camera enforcement. We just don't have that here. Are these on call or only set up for peak hours? Do you have an average rate of what the cost of this is to a project? I could probably get you that information. I don't have that handy right now. They are, as I said earlier, they are in specific contracts. And then as far as when they are deployed within those contracts, as Darcy said, that's more of an art rather than a science. There's a lot of factors that go into the decision of when they should be deployed and where they should be deployed. And then once they are deployed, there is now enough experience people know how to do it.
All right, gentlemen.
Richard,
thank
I'll go
you
off
very,
script
very much.
just a second. You made a comment about speed. You know, that's the other frontier on this. As we get into the changeable message signs and the speed limit signs, we've got to find ways to, you know, it might not be governing it, but if we can at least kind of get with Google Maps and Apple so that speed limit is updated on the Google map, that might be a first step. So I'm just looking for some of those baby steps maybe before we get to the full solution.
As a wise university professor once told me, for every 10% increase that there is in speed, there's a 21% increase in force. So going from a 45-mile-an-hour crash to a 65-mile-an-hour crash, that's where people die. You can have a crash at 45 and survive. You have a crash at 65 and you're not going to make it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We're up against a break, but once again, thank you very much for the incredible presentation. And if you wouldn't mind turning off your cameras and mics and exiting the stage, they can be reached by their email addresses, as you saw. And this information will also be posted and available for you on the Work Zone Clearinghouse. So without further ado, We're going to go ahead and go to our break. When we come back, we'll be talking about advanced technologies to improve work zone safety, and that is a back-to-back session with our innovation session. So we'll see you in just over 10 minutes.